Yeah, moving on, I think the next topic, I think it's, for me, it's like, that's just exactly the way a lot of young startup ecosystems, at least here in continental Europe, are developing. So I think it's a mega topic. Great selection of topics. Next topic is called building a bridge between brands and startups. I think both sides can learn a lot. What I also like was this lady that's going to come up stage in a second is also, as she says herself, building a bridge between Madison Avenue and Mountain View. And then I found something very interesting in her bio that said she likes dogs a lot. When you come on stage, please tell me what kind of dogs you like. Make a lot of noise for Gina Waldhorn from Evol8tion. Thank you.
Hello.
What kind of...
All dogs. I live in New York, and I can't have a dog because I live in a little box in New York City. So
oh my goodness, that's horrible.
I know. So that's my real goal in life, is to get a dog. So I'm working on it.
That's one thing I've achieved already. Dogs are awesome.
Well,
Thank you
maybe
so
you can
much.
lend me
Have a
yours.
great time.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for having me all the way from New York. Really excited to talk to you today about my vision in building a bridge between Madison Avenue and Mountain View. And while this presentation is a bit more directed at the corporates, I think what the startups can use is take some of my talking points, and when you're speaking to corporates, shake them and scare them with what I have to say today as a reason for why they need to be working with your startup and your technology. So my background, I come from the agency world, but as there's a famous quote by a very successful hockey player in the US, Wayne Gretzky. And what Wayne Gretzky said was, when they asked him, how are you so good? He said, I try to be where the puck is going, not where the puck is. And that's what I've always tried to do in my career. I've tried to kind of be where the future is being created. And that's why, I come out to stuff like this to meet all these incredible entrepreneurs and technologists. And I'm obsessed with the future. So does anyone recognize this image? Yes, the DeLorean. So this is from Back to the Future. But what's really interesting, if you look at the future, it is actually this year. So we've made it. We are in the future. And I think that's really exciting. I haven't got my hoverboard yet, but I'm still waiting on it. But the world has certainly changed. I think we can all agree on that. So this is a photo taken from 2005, the announcement of Pope Benedict, and in 2013 with Pope Francis. And I think you can see just how much the world has changed in how people are, congregating and attending events, and the penetration of technology. I think this picture does a really good job of illustrating that. And so if the world is changing, then don't corporates and don't brands need to change with the world, with their consumers? Someone else actually, jumped in front of me yesterday and used this quote. But I think it's really powerful, and it's really important that it's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but it's the one who's most responsive to change. And I think all corporates need to listen to this, recognize the world is changing, and not be so scared of change, and change through innovation. And so while I was at the agencies, I started to realize that when I was speaking to brands, there were a few things that all corporates could agree with when I asked them. The first was, do you believe that technology is important to your business today? And they all said yes. And I said, well, do you believe that technology is only going to get more important over time? And they all said, well, yeah, totally. So everyone's kind of agreeing. And then I started asking them a few more questions. Do you agree that you feel like you're educated on everything going on with regards to your category and your business as it relates to technology? And they kind of said, no, not really. Are you doing enough when it comes to technology? Are you investing and executing and seeing results from technology? And these big corporates kind of said, not really. And what about keeping pace with your consumer? Nope. And how about outpacing your competition with technology? Nope. So there became this kind of big need in the market. And it led to the vision of why I started my company, that there was this massive unmet need with regards to technology inside big corporations. And specifically, I believe that collaboration with startups represents a unique and differentiating opportunity for these brands to get ahead. And almost as a result of the first two, brands have got to become more entrepreneurial. These big corporations, and we heard some awesome talks yesterday about internal innovation and startup development, they have to start looking more like startups in order to survive in kind of this new, brave new world. So I wanted to look up the definition of innovation. And I think what was really interesting about the definition is that it's about change, and it's also about creativity and newness, and doing things differently, which when you think about what it means to do things differently, it's actually the antidote, if you will, to the definition of insanity, which is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. So if these big brands are, expect themselves to keep up and change with the rapidly changing tide of technology, then don't they need to do things different? Don't they need to be coming up with new ideas? Well, there's actually some people who will say there's no such thing as a new idea. There are theses and college courses that base themselves around the fact that the Jetsons have come up with everything already. That anything we could have thought of, the Jetsons already thought of. So you've got kind of Rosie, the robot maid, and you've got the Roomba robot. Doesn't this look familiar? Sort of like FaceTime? The tanning bed, not all of the inventions I think were that good. That's someone that is kind of well known in the US called Tan Mom. Our tabloids. But I kind of refute that. I don't believe that. I think that, as Walt Disney said, if you can dream it, you can do it. And I believe there are all sorts of new ideas. And in fact, I believe that technology can be those new ideas, and that technology can solve any business problem that a big corporate has. And at the heart of technology and innovation is the startup. And startups feel a bit like the new shiny object, but I think they've always been at the heart of technology and at the heart of innovation. It's just that brands are finally coming around to the idea of entrepreneurship and the spark and the ideation behind building a startup. But let's take a look at the definition of a startup, because we've been talking about startups for days, but what is a startup really? So I went to Wikipedia, a trusted source, and right in the first couple of sentences about the definition of a startup are the words technology, and right after that, funding. So the words venture capital, angel investors are actually within the first several sentences of the definition of a startup. So you've kind of got this three-legged stool, I believe, that creates a startup, and you've got your tech leg, and you've got your funding leg. I think there's something missing, but I will get to that. To look a little bit deeper into this funding leg, let's look at the US and look at where this funding's coming from. So one of the latest stats says there's almost 600,000 startups being created every month in the US. I mean, that's mind-boggling. And on average, each one of those startups is trying to raise close to $80,000 on average across all of these 500,000 startups a month. That's about $530 billion of startup capital raised in the US alone. And you might think, well, yeah, because there's so much VC capital, and these VCs are just pouring money into these startups. You can just kind of walk into a bar in the US and a VC is going to write you a check. But if you actually look a little bit deeper to see where the money is actually coming from that funds these startups, what you'll see is that it's coming from the pocket of the founders and the entrepreneurs. They're going into their piggy banks and they're taking their kids' college funds and they're funneling it into their big new idea. Or they're going out to raise among friends and family. And then comes in angels and investors. But for the most part, this funding is coming from founders themselves. That's where the funding's coming from for most of the startups. And unfortunately, they take all their own money and they put them into this great idea. And I think we heard a lot yesterday about don't do it, save yourself the trouble, because of this valley of death where a lot of the startups end up. And I think the latest stat is also less than 2% of startups will ever get any of the funding that they're going after. So it's really hard. You don't want to end up in that valley of death. You really want to try out. You want to go get your funding. But maybe, venture capital isn't always the right route. It's giving up a lot of your company. And, it's a difficult relationship. I think we heard again yesterday from Mike that, raise less. If you can raise less, you're probably doing better. So they've turned to venture capitalists. They've reached into their own piggybacks. We've actually turned to total strangers as founders to fund our company. And I know we're already seeing platforms that give away equity on crowdsourcing platforms over in Europe. In the US, we just passed the Jobs Act, so we're going to start to see that people who fund projects on things like Kickstarter can actually get equity. But again, there's kind of this missing part. You know, where's the marketing in this? You know, you're built with the tech, you go out for the funding, startups try to scale big and get big quickly, but marketing has kind of been left in the dust. And they're going to VCs, and they're going to friends and family, and they're going to strangers. But where are the brands? Where are the experts at marketing and all of this, the corporates, the people who a lot of these startups are planning on monetizing against anyway in the future? They're not part of this process upstream. Well, there's a reason for that. There's a big disconnect. For the first part, this is a letter that actually Shiv Singh, who was at PepsiCo, wrote in Ad Age, a big publication in the US, a letter to startups saying, you know what, startups, we're tired of being your monetization strategy. Don't think you can go out and get lots of funding and get big and then come knocking on Pepsi's door and saying, shit, my VCs want me to monetize, so would you give me $100,000 and I'll run you some ads. They're kind of tired of that. So brands are a little bit frustrated. And at the same time, startups are frustrated when the big corporate brand comes in and says, hey, why don't you create me something awesome that will be my silver bullet and do it for a couple, $1,000 because you're two guys in a garage, so I don't really need to pay you. So the two sides need each other, but they're not really talking to each other very well. But I said, well, what if they could? What if we could build a bridge between these two worlds who don't so desperately need each other, but who aren't speaking the same language? What if we could connect the worlds of Madison Avenue with Mountain View? And I play a what-if game to kind of bring that to life. What if Kodak had acquired Instagram? And maybe they acquired them early on for $500 million and then went and sold them to Facebook for $1 billion. Might Kodak's business be in a much different place if they had invested in this space early on? What if Netflix had been the ones to incubate, Blockbuster had been the ones to incubate Netflix? Maybe closing all of their stores would have been a strategic move instead of the end of an error. And we're seeing this happen. We are seeing these connections take place in the market. We saw Avis, a big car rental, buy Zipcar, which is a car sharing company, kind of building on that sharing economy. And more recently, we saw Under Armour. Do you guys know Under Armour? Okay, so Under Armour is like Nike. They're a big fitness apparel company. They make workout clothes. So they went and they bought a little app called Map My Fitness last year for $150 million. And then about 3 months ago, they bought another one called MyFitnessPal. So here you have an apparel company that makes workout leggings and sports bras and underwear. And they've transformed their business from a simple apparel product to an entire digital ecosystem of fitness and health apps. I mean, talk about how the consumer is changing. Under Armour's kind of placed a bet. And you better believe that if you are Reebok or you're Adidas or you're Lululemon, you're wondering, shit, did I miss out on something? What's my Map My Fitness? And the thing is, brands and startups ask a lot of the same questions, right? Entrepreneurs start because they have a problem and they need to build a solution. So, it's getting unaffordable to stay at a hotel. You want to travel the world. Two guys start Airbnb. Can't get a cab. Two guys start Uber. It's difficult to kind of film yourself. There's got to be another better way. GoPro. This app on the right here is called Run P. Has anyone ever heard of Run P? So what Run P is, it tells you when in a movie is the exact moment you should leave and use the bathroom. It's brilliant. And when you get back to your seat, it sends you a text message that tells you exactly what you missed. So problem, solution. And so brands, every time, brands start a brief, it starts with a challenge. I worked at agencies for a decade, and every time I got a brief from a brand, it said, we've got a problem we need to solve. And the answer for brands always seems to be advertising. But if they're asking the same questions, then why don't they come up with the same solutions? Why don't brands come up with technology solutions? So that's the company that I built. That's what I'm trying to do today. I'm trying to connect big brands with early stage startups to pilot program, to invest, or even to potentially acquire. And I'm doing this because I think both sides need each other more than they know. They both have assets and goals and objectives that directly align with each other in kind of a perfect symbiotic balance to help each other out. Specifically, I'm also talking about early stage startups. So, as Mike said, these brands really care about scale. That's important to them. But early stage offers unique benefits in terms of customization and opportunity to get in first with first mover advantage and competitive advantage. And the opportunity to remove barriers before they exist. And what I mean by that, and I actually shared this example yesterday on the panel, take a company like Twitter, who didn't want to talk to brands. They kind of kept their head down while they were developing. And only after they launched did they realize that they couldn't work with any of the beer and spirits brands because they didn't ask anybody how old they were when they created a Twitter profile. So what you had was you try to follow a beverage brand and you kind of get this tweet back at you that's asking you to go to this other page where you fill in a birth date or a fake birth date, and then you have to go back and refollow them in order for them to then follow you, and it's a whole mess. So if you talk to a brand while you're still young as a startup, you can hear things like age matters to us, or different things that they need, and build that into your solution so that when you're ready to go out to the market and monetize, you already know what the brand who you're looking to sell to really wants. And the goal is to make a win-win, right? We don't want to just kind of give your technology to the big evil brand. We want to help the startup too. And both sides are looking for some of the same type of things, but from a different angle. So startups need scale. Brands have scale. Startups are looking for acceleration. Maybe a brand can help get you to that next moment on your roadmap faster than you could have done it alone. Pivot. Startups are great at doing things and they don't work and they change course, and brands are horrible at that. Brands are the aircraft carrier. They can't move the ship. So if you are a startup that can help them learn how to be more agile and flexible, that's a big win for these brands. And for the brands, the industry is changing, and it's more important than ever for brands to get more from less. And what I mean by that is it's really expensive to buy TV, and less people are watching TV. So that's a problem. So brands are needing to find startups who can offer them more efficient paths towards using technology and creating experiences for their consumers. So the cost of a Super Bowl ad, I believe, last year was above $3 million for a 30-second spot. So for the price of one 30-second Super Bowl spot, one of these brands could probably own their own startup, could outright buy probably, I bet a couple people in this room would sell. I mean, early exit, move on to the next thing. It takes so little to some of these big brands to truly create experiences. And that's what this is about, right? It's no more advertising, it's utility and service and experience on behalf of the brand brought to their consumer. So what does that look like? This is an app called Sit or Squat. It's a public restroom finder app that tells you whether or not a nearby bathroom is clean enough. And if it's clean, you sit, and if it's not, you squat. I don't know why all my examples seem to have restroom theme to them, but they do today. And so for Charmin, Charmin actually went and invested in Sit or Squat. And so for a toilet paper brand that, when do you think about toilet paper? Really, when you run out is probably the only time. There's no connection with this brand. But now when Charmin went and did a partnership here with Sit or Squat, they started to help potty training moms. Maybe you're out on vacation and you don't know where to take your potty training son or daughter. And Charmin here with this app comes to your rescue. So it's creating service and utility as a brand instead of just buying more advertising. And I said the world is changing and it's time to change the game. So look at what American Express has done with Uber. In a way, Uber has almost become a competition to kind of other bank cards. So if you think about it, if I put my American Express in Uber, I don't even remember it's in there. It's just my default card for Uber. And as Uber becomes bigger and starts delivering air conditionings, or becomes carpool, whatever's next on their roadmap, the card that is embedded with Uber has a massive advantage. So you definitely got to think that, MasterCard or Visa feel a little bit bad that they didn't get in first and let American Express take this opportunity with Uber. And the thing is, this isn't just nice to have. This isn't, this is something sparkly and great that the brand should do. They have to do this. I mean, 70% of Fortune 500 companies from 1990 are gone off the list. And 50% from 2000 off the list. So it's not, brands shouldn't be thinking about, geez, how much is it going to cost for me to do this little pilot with a startup? What they need to think is, how much does it cost if I don't do this? What am I going to lose? What is the return on investment of keeping my company in business? And I believe if they don't work with startups or get to innovating or do some of these internal innovation programs, they could be like this poor polar bear. So I like to talk about something called kind of what's your heresy. I think it's really amazing when brands think about putting themselves out of business. What would the world look like? What could put me as a brand out of business? Well, for one, this is Sao Paulo. So if you were a quick service restaurant or a fast food chain and you really relied on out-of-home advertising to driving consumers to your store and you were in Sao Paulo, boom, overnight, the government passed a law, no more out-of-home advertising. There goes your number one marketing channel. What do? You have to think about these things happening. If you're Coca-Cola in New York, Bloomberg decided to get rid of supersized drinks. If you're a beverage company and you look at New York as a big distribution channel, you just lost your biggest size of soda. And Mike Tyson actually has a great quote. He says, everybody has a strategy until you get punched in the face. And I think brands need to think about this. When are we going to get punched in the face? What is the Dollar Shave Club that's going to come and transform our business or spin us on our heads? What if, this actually happened too? It's been passed in New York and a lot of other states that fast food restaurants have to put the calorie count of all the items on their menu. So now that you actually know how many calories are in one of those sandwiches or even the salads, you think they're healthy and then you look at the calorie count. This could be absolutely devastating to these restaurants. What do you do about that? Well, I can tell you what Panera, a big sandwich food chain, did. They spent a year and they worked on removing all of the GMO and non-natural ingredients. So this is a company that actually saw this coming and made a change, and it was big. And you know what? It probably hurt their share price for a little while, but it was kind of embracing their heresy, knowing that this nutrition was coming, and they had to change their model. So where do brands start, right? How do big corporates start to change, start to steer the ship, and work with startups? Well, the good news is some of these big corporates already have a methodology in place. So you may have heard of the 70-20-10 rule. This is a rule that a lot of big brands use. All my old clients at the agencies use this methodology. And what it stands for is 70% of your marketing needs to go to tried and true, the stuff that works, the TV, what is going to drive sales. 20% is going towards things that are sort of new but have already proven themselves out. So maybe it's something new on Facebook. And 10% of your budget should be completely dedicated towards innovation, something you've never done before, something that is not going to be held accountable to sales, totally risky. So, Coke has actually calls this now, new, and next, where the 10% is what's next. And they've publicly talked about this. And lots of brands talk about this methodology. But if you actually look at what's happening in the market, no one's actually putting it into practice. Nobody is really near 10%. That's a lot. So I like to say, Eric Schmidt at Google used to talk about the poison of incrementality. And he said, everything you should think of 10 times that. So, 10x thinking is what he called it. I kind of flipped that on its head, and we like to say at Evol8tion, well, how about divide by 10 acting, right? So if you're supposed to spend 10% of your budget on something that's totally new and out there as a brand, divide that by 10, and then divide it by 10 again. Spend 0.1% of your budget against tech. Put that into a startup pilot program. Start with a pilot. Start with just a small experiment. And startups, when you go and you pitch to big brands, don't talk to them about, building a whole new platform or reinventing their business. Talk about a small, isolated pilot that you can get off the ground in 90 days, that you can measure, and that won't break the bank. Speak to them in terms of pilot, and then ladder up to maybe a proof of concept for something bigger, and then maybe all the way up to building a prototype for them that's going to change their business. At Evol8tion, we developed a process to do this, to help brands actually figure out how to put some rigor behind finding the right startup partner. What we encourage brands to do is, one, get educated. Go to things like this, learn about the companies that are out there, and focus on the tech sectors that really matter to you. If you're a fashion brand, you may think that, something like augmented reality or Oculus Rift is really cool. But maybe for your brand, what's more important is retail technology. Start where it matters most to your business. And once you have kind of a tech sector that you want to focus on, then we go out and we help brands scout startups. So we call on lots of different incubators and accelerators and shared workspaces, and hopefully now I've got a lot more Slovenian partners that I can pick up the phone and call and say I've got a brand who's looking for a startup in a specific category. So we evaluate those startups, we help brands pick one of those startups, and then it's, again, all about getting into market with some kind of test that you can execute. And ultimately what you're looking for is some kind of exit. So maybe the big brand can make an investment, maybe they outright buy you, or maybe you offer the brand something like exclusivity, competitive advantage, right of first refusal. These are things that the brand will find incredibly valuable, and that you can kind of offer that brand to form a big strategic partnership over the long term. So what does this look like in real life? I've actually done this. This is one of our clients, Mondelez International. They own brands like Oreo and Chips Ahoy and Sour Patch Kids and Ritz Crackers. So a big consumer packaged goods company. And we ran a program with them called Mobile Futures. And Mobile Futures saw 9 different brands partner with 9 startups to execute 9 pilots in 90 days. That 90 days, again, really key to make sure that the brands got into market and that they moved quickly and they didn't take so long that the startup went out of business. So here's what one of the pilot programs looked like. Sour Patch Kids candy worked with a company called Keep. Have any of you guys ever heard of Keep? So Keep is an in-game rewards network. Keep rewards players in mobile games with brand coupons anytime you get a high score. Now, Sour Patch is all about sour moments that then turn sweet. That's their brand equity. So what we actually did with Keep was tweak their algorithm so that anytime somebody in a game did something really dumb or died or got the lowest score, then we sent them a reward. And this was fantastic because it was something the startup had never thought to do before. It changed their business model and opened up a whole new revenue stream for them. And it really built on the Sour Patch equity of sour then sweet. So it was a really strong kind of match between the two. And this program actually ended up leading Mondelez to win Mobile Marketer of the Year in the US for 2013. And last year we took the program to Brazil and Australia, and it's moving back to the US this summer again. Probably the most important part of this program was not the pilots that went to market, but again, that change we saw in the marketers who participated. So we did an interview, and all these are actually live on YouTube. You can go watch. That's my co-founder, Joe. He's interviewing all of the marketers who participated in this program and talking to them about, what are you going to do different now? What did you learn from this startup? And it's awesome. They just trash Mondelez. They just say, oh, we're so slow. We have too much legal review. We can't get anything done. But now that they've worked with these startup founders, it's transformed the way they think as a marketer. So you guys can have that kind of impact on the marketers that you work with. And it's a good thing they did this, because just a few months after they launched this program, Tesco in the UK banned all candy and snacks from the checkout aisle. So this is one of those heresies that came true. But luckily, because Mondelez is experimenting with new mobile startups and new ways of subscription to deliver their snacks and their chocolates, this doesn't scare them quite as much as another consumer packaged good who maybe has never explored something new with technology around distribution or reaching your consumer. And the final example that I'll give you is something we did between Kraft Foods, their Crystal Light beverage brand, and the startup called Novalia. So Novalia creates conductive ink. So this is ink with circuitry actually built into the ink. So Kraft came to us and said, man, our in-store displays are super boring. People just walk by, they fall off the shelf, nobody cares. How can technology, how can a startup change what we're doing in store? So we partnered them with this conductive ink startup, and we reprinted some of their signage for a concert series that they were running over the summer. So now with this poster, just by touching the ink, it's just a piece of paper, it plays music, and it turns on lights, and it sends tweets. So this is a revolutionary new ink technology that you can see how might totally change the world of display, or maybe the world of product packaging, and really is starting to get Kraft Foods excited about what they could do with something like conductive ink. So to kind of wrap up and leave you guys with some thoughts, I believe there are basically three types of brands. There are those who make things happen. There are those who kind of watch and asked what happened. And then you've got these guys. So I hope you guys will kind of take this today, everything I'm talking about change. And someone once said, you know, brands and big corporates change only when the pain of change is less than the pain of not changing. But unfortunately, by then, it's too late. So for all the kind of corporates out there, you can get my contact information. I would love to see you guys do at least one partnership with one startup in 2015. And then at the end of the year, December 31st, you guys can call me. I'll give you my phone number and just tell me what you did. Because I think that's the first step, is just doing something, doing one thing, taking a risk, making a partnership with one startup. I don't want my phone to look like this on December 31st. So I hope someone takes me up on this offer and actually reaches out. Also on our website, we created a little diagnostic that asks 8 questions to corporates that starts to say how you think about innovation versus how you act. So I definitely encourage you guys to take a test and maybe look at yourselves in the mirror as a corporate and see how innovative you're really being. And I'll leave you with a statement we love to say, which is, how do you kill a dinosaur? You don't. Evolution does. So thank you guys so much.